Welcome to this episode of Weather Wise Guys. I'm here with the recently famous meteorologist Evan Chickfera, and I'm a D-list celebrity.
I'm not even sure what to do anymore, Wes. I had a tailored shirt. I was doing weather, and boom, there it is. So, thanks to anyone who might be watching who's new. We do this all the time. If you want to come talk weather with us, recap the week, talk about the week ahead, all sorts of fun.
Yeah, and we will be recapping just a week's worth of weather that occurred over like 2 or 3 days.
Seriously.
Violent tornadoes across the southeast. Evan, what was your longest day that you were at work? How many hours?
Saturday, and it was somewhere around 16 hours, but we were on the air for like 12 straight. So I actually just found that out this morning. They were like telling us the numbers. They're like, yeah, you're on for like 12 hours and 4 minutes nonstop. And I was like, I guess your body just kind of just shuts off and you just keep going. No bathroom breaks, no nothing. We just chugged along. So
Robot mode. I was only working 12-hour days, so that was nothing.
what a joke.
Yeah. Evan had violent tornadoes. I had high wind, hazardous air, and then snow. And we may get a little bit of that snow hazardous air combo again with our next big storm system, at least coming through the Midwest.
I saw that this morning, like Wednesday.
Yes, Wednesday is going to be another fun one. And forecasts. We talk about the forecast. We give a forecast. How reliable are the forecasts? We'll talk about the hurricane forecast and just your 7 to 10 day forecast that you see on a regular basis. Evan, how long a forecast do you guys do? What's your 7 day?
Yeah, we have a 7 day. We used to have a 10 day when I first got here, which I hated because like 5 days I feel pretty good about. 3 days I'm great. Like you get outside of like 7 and it's like, all right, we can recognize a pattern, but like I would never put it to a degree, like exactly 78 degrees. Maybe I'd tell you that there's a system coming through, but like so much changes and half the time what you're forecasting hasn't even developed yet. Like the severe weather over the weekend, like a week beforehand, I mean, that system and that trough hadn't even developed yet. So like the models can tell you so much, but there's certain things they can't like depict. And that's what I was trying to explain. Like you just grab one model run of something and there's a good chance that it changes, like leading up to it. So I feel pretty good about 5, solid about 7, not 10. What about you?
We do 10. I'll explain my 10-day forecasting strategy.
You just must be that much better at forecasting. Teach me your ways.
Probably not. Okay, getting on a serious note here. This was actually really shocking to me in some respects that Missouri led the death count from all these tornadoes. It's shocking in the sense that the state of Missouri, I don't think had quite as many tornadoes as maybe Mississippi or Alabama, but they came through at night. And nocturnal tornadoes are, I think, 3 times deadlier than any other type of day tornadoes. So that somewhat explains that situation. I know people in Alabama and Mississippi, Evan, were thoroughly warned about the upcoming tornado threat.
Yeah, we talked about it in the days leading up to it. But man, I would not have guessed this either, Wes, that you had the 12 fatalities. But you're right. Those overnight systems are scary because people let their guard down. You go to sleep. It's natural. I praise our local National Weather Service office because their lead time with their storms, their tornado warned storms this past weekend was almost 30 minutes, which means we had almost a half hour heads up before they got there. So that was awesome. But I hate seeing the death toll. The goal is, and I know you feel the same way, we get through a severe event, no fatalities, no injuries, because in theory, that means we communicated well. People knew it was coming and they got to their safe place. So when you hear about it, it's upsetting. It lets you down, but it happens, fortunately.
Yeah. And then I think we had that 105 is like approximately the amount of tornado reports that we've seen. There's all over the country, they're still surveying damage. So it may be till the end of the week until they figure out.
Preliminary. That's why we always say like preliminary reports because these might change. Like we have 7 surveyed tornadoes, but that's going to go up.
And then the 8 in Kansas was actually from like dust and smoke that went across I-70 in central and western Kansas. And so there was about a 50-car pileup that
Whoa.
occurred on I-70. So I think I'm lumping, Kansas with that because I mean it was a severe windstorm that came through with dust, and it was just an absolutely huge, huge sad pileup
Wow.
that happened with all that. Looking at the tornadoes, at least the reports of them, you can see swaths that went through near Hattiesburg, one near Greenville. Birmingham has a few. I think there was a brief one reported near Atlanta. St. Louis on Friday evening, it was three confirmed tornadoes blowing through the entirety of the St. Louis metropolitan area. I'll be interesting to see how many tornadoes um, ended up happening. But there was an evening situation, a night situation for those in southeastern Missouri. And so that is why the deaths were so much higher in Missouri. Meanwhile, yes, I think there were a few tornadoes in Mississippi that were evening, or that were nighttime, but most of them were afternoon and
Yeah.
evening. Does that sound right, Evan?
Yes, most of them were in the afternoon because I actually saw in the National Weather Service chat in Jackson the screen grab of a big wedge tornado near, I think it was Tylersville, Mississippi. And oh man, it was one of those low precipitation ones that you could see the whole thing, big old wedge. And there were some long track ones. And you can tell there by the report, Wes, like all of those in a line, that was one supercell. And man, that was scary. But those were beasts. And that's the ones we were like, oh no, here it comes. And all you can do is wait. So
I wonder if we're able to capture that from this image. This shows the rotation tracks of the storms. Is Tylertown, is that south of Jackson? Where would that
yeah,
be?
that's down like I believe a little south of Jackson. It's like due
Okay.
west of Hattiesburg, I believe.
Okay. So it'll be further down there. We're not able to capture
You
it up,
might be
but
seeing the very edge of it there, where I see a couple of the pixels. Yeah, right there,
yeah.
because it was still really big, and then it cycled down, and then it started to come back, and we ended up getting some of the remnants of one of those supercells. I'm not sure which one, but
It looks like
um,
it would have been probably, if it's tracking up this way, maybe it was the one that got close to Columbus. And that the Gordo Reform one was here, right? Just west of Tuscaloosa.
yep, and that was the one that came out of Kemper, Mississippi, and that one also Kemper County, and that one also had a tornado report on it back further. I forget the town, but there was debris lofted, and so we knew if these held together and got to the state, we were probably dealing with issues. And we had 22 tornado warnings issued during this event, and so I reached out to the National Weather Service because I thought this seems high. I don't remember a recent event, and this is the most since 2021 when they had 38 in a single 24-hour period. But the average lead time, people might not know this at home. So there's an entity that issues watches. That's the Storm Prediction Center. There's an entity that issues warnings. That's your local National Weather Service office. And then we just communicate that. They were on average giving 27 minutes heads up. I think it was 26.8 minutes when I calculated out for all of the tornado warned storms. And that is huge. I mean, think about, I'm not sure what it would have been in the 90s before you had dual pole and the fancier, the better radars, but they're able to give such a heads up that even if you're just goofing off and you're outside playing or your kids are out or you're at a ball game, like you have some time to get somewhere safe. And I think that makes a huge difference.
I think it's also important that the type of tornadoes these were allowed them to be very obvious on radar. And so when they stay obvious, you're like, okay, we're just going to draw these polygons out because we know exactly
Yep.
where it is. And so when they stay strong and obvious and well defined, it's a lot easier, I think, for the radar operator to give you heads up, which is a good kind of side of things, because if it's an obvious tornado, that means it's extra strong. So you want to give them people more lead time.
That I did not even think about that because if this was a QLCS, those come up and go away. You can't give 30 minutes lead time, but these individual discrete cells, you could see them in their general motion from 100 miles away. So I'm sure that played a role. That's a good call.
So Missouri, it's just crazy. I did not expect for us to come out on top in terms of the reports. A lot of these were wind damage reports that bumped us up, and I think probably Alabama, a lot of those, or maybe not a lot, but maybe a good chunk of those ended up being tornado
Yep.
reports. Let's look here. 15. So out of the 72, 15 were tornadoes, and then out of the 297 severe reports for Missouri, only 18 of them were tornadoes. So,
Your
like, I
state
guess,
was covered in like wind. I think I saw 100-mile-an-hour plus wind when I filtered through as like a what do they call significant wind. I think a couple of the winds in Missouri fell under that significant category, which is just crazy to me.
yeah. We'll get into the Missouri happenings here in just a minute because it was a pretty crazy day for me. I want to go through some of these more significant tornadoes, and starting with this Maplesville to Clanton tornado. When I was watching Evan and just beaming with pride of my friend who was just doing such a great job, with such a great boss. When I saw this Maplesville tornado, I'm like, that is a very big, noticeable one. Evan, what were you seeing when you're tracking this tornado?
A lot of these like came up very quickly, and that's kind of what was scary. So we started telling people to take these as like some of them had a severe thunderstorm warning on them. We said take it like a tornado warning, and this within a matter of 2 or 3 scans tightened up. And I saw this right before I saw the debris signature, and I thought, oh boy, this is going to be a big one. And when I see the bright red and the bright green touch, we call that gate to gate shear. We have a lot of fancy terms in weather. We try to simplify it on the air, but when those green and reds touch, I'll sometimes say the only time you want to see green and red together is Christmas. Never on a map like that, because
Funny.
that shows
It's
winds
funny.
in one direction going very fast and winds in another direction going very fast. In this case, we had, I believe, an inbound wind of around 95 and an outbound of like 36. So that gate to gate shear of like 125, that's the change in wind speed over a very short time. So we knew that that was going to be a rough one. And this one had at least one fatality on it, and did a lot of damage in a rural community.
Yeah, that was. I don't know what about that stood out other than this very, very tight. I think there may have been. Maybe you recall this on reflectivity. Was there a legitimate debris ball that
Yeah.
had shown up on this? Okay.
This one had a debris ball showing up at 21,000 feet. So, to put that in perspective, that people watching, a lot of the debris lofted to 10, 12,000 feet. This got to 21,000 feet, which speaks to the intensity of the updraft. And the updraft is what's feeding this thing. You got your air going up. I just talked about the winds going different directions. Then you have a strong enough updraft to keep that wind shear tilted up in the tornado. And so you're talking about tree branches, parts of houses, all that stuff, 20,000 feet in the atmosphere. And yeah, that was significant.
I'm honestly surprised it wasn't stronger than an EF3.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought that was going to be higher, but keep in mind where this went through was pretty rural. So the places it
Okay.
hit some trailers, it hit a lot of trees. And the drone video I've seen so far, it's scoured land, but some of it's open fields too. So you don't have as much to destroy, but what it touched, it did a lot.
Is this the one where the fish got sucked up, or is that a different?
We have a couple knuckleheads in our chat. And I should have, I shouldn't have said anything, but I touched it because I was like, what is this guy doing with fish reports? And yeah, it was meant to be funny, but anyway,
It
fish
was.
up in the sky
It
when it
was.
rains, amphibians.
Okay, getting back a little bit more serious. How long have I been watching you at this point? Oh, I'm out of order. I'm out of order. Okay, so this one was 9:05. This
Yeah.
one was from 8:05. This one very close to the radar side. At this point, the
Yes.
National Weather Service has to briefly abandon ship, go to their safe place, and then another National Weather Service office in Atlanta then takes over. But the radar operator had to have been on his phone, looking at like on Slack and on a radar scope, saying the tornado is on top of the Walmart.
Yes. He knew exactly where it was, and I was very impressed. Again, I love our weather service office in Birmingham. He put in there in all caps, hitting Walmart Kalira take cover. Like he knew exactly where it was, and then we're able to like communicate that. And he knew also that this was going up. I mean, right up towards the radar site, and everyone knows who lives down there where that radar is because you can see it from the interstate.
Yeah,
So
it's
that
right
gave,
here on Varnins. That's where the
yep.
radar site is.
And it gave people the heads up they needed. Now, unfortunately, this also did decent. So this was only, I think, an EF0, or no, this may have been EF1.
I think that was a
Yeah,
one.
EF1. But it tore up. There's a dealership for campers. I mean, that is like a playground for tornadoes. It tossed all these new campers onto the interstate, did some damage to a mobile home park. But this was like this another one that spun up pretty quickly. It was a straight line, and then boom, you saw that gate to gate, bright green and red. But yeah, he was like, Walmart, look out. And everyone knows where the Walmart is, right? Like everyone where
Apparently,
you live. So
apparently everyone knows what the Walmart is in Calera.
yeah,
Calera.
it's a
Calera.
hot spot.
This does kind of speak to radar technology. I want you to compare the kind of green and reds here, how wide and broad it is, compared to how this one is. Yes, it's a smaller tornado, but the amount of pixels it's taking up, and this one compared to when the storm was a little bit bigger, yes, but further away from the radar site, really speaks to how small this was and how quickly it developed. So whenever we're looking at tornadoes and they're further away from the radar site, it looks like they are just miles wide, but the radar at such a far distance away is picking up on the overall rotation of the storm. Meanwhile, this one is picking up exactly on the tornado that is on the ground. That makes
That's
sense.
as like HD as it gets. All
Yeah,
radar beams are tilted at a half degree. And you think about it, if they're tilted at a half degree, that's not a ton, right? But the further you get away, the higher that beam shoots. So like the further a storm is from the radar, the less confident, we can say at times because it's pointing at the rotation that's higher up. So it's hard to tell in some instances, oh, is that actually reaching the ground with its rotation, or is that rotation aloft in the supercell that's not, fully forming a tornado? And this is a perfect example of like, oh yeah, that thing's there.
and walk us through like your perspective because I know initially you and James were like, I don't know if that's really a tornado. You get close to the radar site, things get a little messy. What was y'all's thought process?
So, obviously we're not talking, one-on-one during this. He's doing his thing and I'm doing mine. And since I drive radar and he's looking at a lot of reports too, my job is to keep an eye out for anything suspicious on the radar. And I remember, I think a couple minutes before I said, oh, this is something we need to watch. It just looked suspicious. You see something that's not a normal return on radar. It can be on your reflectivity with the rain, or it can be on this is velocity. And I thought, oh, this looks weird, but there was no talk about it in chat because, again, National Weather Service office, they're monitoring the current warnings as well as the rest of the radar. And I thought, okay, this is just something to watch. And then very quickly tightened up. And then sure enough, we jumped to it. And this may have been already on the ground when we got to it. I don't remember specifically, but they happened very fast.
I think it was just looking at the storm report. It may have been already on the ground. Like I'm just gonna compare it, Calera. So it looks like the storm report had it south of Calera,
That's
pardon me, right
extreme
there,
northern Chilton County then.
Chilton. So it
So
looks
what
like it started in
Chilton?
whatever this county is down here. And then
Yeah, Chilton.
okay, Chilton. Okay, and then any other notable tornadoes here? Those are the only two ones that I grabbed screenshots of.
Yeah, the EF2, I'll say in winter over near Talladega.
Oh
So
yeah.
fun fact,
Oh, that one.
Talladega a had not had a tornado warning there in several years. I think it might have been since like 2012. That may have been the last time that the city of Talladega was put under a warning. Um,
Wow.
I had it as one of my fun facts here because I love my fun facts, but that one that went there, that Winterboro one, that had another scary debris ball, Wes, and it intensified quick. That was a straight line wind event, and the northern edge from the bow actually started to spin in, and the bow echo actually caused a tornado. We'll see that evolve sometimes. You'll get these little eddies at the end of the tornado. So like the line bows out, and then at either the northern or southern point, they start to spin because of the motion. And that one came up quick, and there was another fatality there. So just it was a long night, longest night we've had in quite some time with these.
Yeah, so we have a few tornadoes here. Let's say maybe one, two, three, four tornadoes that tracked out of Mississippi and into Alabama. I don't know if there's one maybe further up here as well, but I mean that seems to be the case. Whenever we have these tornado outbreaks, they can just go right across the state line and
Yep.
get going. So meanwhile, back in Kansas City, my Friday and Saturday was a little wild. Friday we had a bunch of wind before, during, and after the thunderstorms. You look at these yellow numbers; those are the wind gusts the storms actually produced, and there are far more white numbers or non-thunderstorm wind gusts that did damage than the actual severe weather itself. And this is probably the third time in 4 months in which we've had purely gradient wind driven storms that do a ton of damage.
And that's what I think throws people is like, hey, the sun's out, or maybe it's not raining, but you're going to have a 70-mile-an-hour wind gust come through. Like, that's hard for even like my mind to like wrap around as a meteorologist that, hey, it's nice out. There's no storm, but guess what? You might lose a bunch of trees.
Yeah. Or even after like the storms pass, people think, okay, we're fine. No, the following 4 hours after the storms passed, the wind was still gusting 60 to 70 miles per hour. It's like a land cane or something like that. So essentially, we have hours of strong wind, 60 to 70 mile per hour wind gusts for hours. And the wind is out of the southwest. What's in the southwest is Texas, um, Oklahoma, parts of Kansas, the desert southwest. So there's a bunch, which is pretty dry right now. So there's a bunch of dust coming up. Oklahoma is having wildfires. And so
Wow.
all this air is coming up. And so we ended up having, this is 10 o'clock at night, and really the
Wow.
hazardous air began at like probably 7 or 8. It's all just like creeping up on Kansas City. And I know you can't tell, but our scale here goes from, unhealthy to hazardous. You can't see this little sliver of maroon. It's
No.
past hazardous. And so that's what
Good
came up.
grief.
And so from like 9 o'clock, probably from 9 p.m. to 9 a.m., Friday and Saturday, it was like all of Kansas City was standing next to a bonfire outside. It
Oh, that's
was,
the worst. Man, I didn't realize it was that widespread of an issue for you guys.
and so that's part of the reason why you had that gigantic pileup in western Kansas, because the smoke was so bad, the dust was so bad, people couldn't see. And so it was a terrible combination of all that happening. And even with, you can kind of see the westerly wind starting to come in, that is
Mhm.
just more dust coming in from this giant dust storm, again, that caused a 50-car pileup with 8 deaths. And so now we get into Saturday, right? And like everything's all right, everything's calm, everything's fine. And then Saturday at like 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening, which I don't, let me see if I can pull this up. I think I only have 24. I'm not gonna be able to show it. But at like 6 o'clock, all of a sudden the radar just starts to blossom with like rain. You're like, okay, the drizzle's starting. I thought there might be some drizzle. No, it starts snowing over the entire city, over all of St. Joseph, Leavenworth, Harrisonville, really like all of this area. The radar just, it starts blooming, and it starts snowing and sleeting, and this wintry mixes like over the entire portion of eastern Kansas and western Missouri for probably 6 hours. So no one had this in their forecast. People thought it would drizzle. It snowed for 6 hours. We all ended up getting about a half of an inch of snow by the time it was done on Saturday, like late Saturday night, like 3 a.m. And the snow makes a ton of sense because we've had these storm systems before where, like, yes, strong wind, thunderstorms, strong wind gusts, snow. But for whatever reason, didn't look like there would be snow this time, and then it did, and then it did snow.
So did you get any grief for that? Did anyone get mad at you?
No, because the thing is, we are good for two or three just completely surprise events, like no matter what. There is a very, thankfully, a good understanding amongst the people that like something is going to happen that no one expects, like whatsoever, and it's just like, yeah, that's how it. That's just what happens.
That's good to know. You get a couple mulligans throughout
Yeah,
the year. When we miss one, we hear about it, and that's when I'm like, and you want us to do more than a 7-day? We get it wrong day two. Blah 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 blah. It can happen, man. We get
oh
it wrong
yeah,
sometimes.
oh yeah. I mean, you predict stuff for a living, you got to get it wrong eventually.
Of course.
So, looking at another big snowstorm, I think it's going to come into Nebraska, maybe the Dakotas, northwestern Kansas as well. And you see the really strong winds coming up. This is Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. We're going to have gusts here near 40 miles per hour on Tuesday. And then as this area of low pressure comes across, you can see a little bit of light rain and then changing over to snow on Wednesday afternoon. And then our wind direction then shifts out of the northwest. And so we could get 50 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts Wednesday afternoon out of the southwest. And then in the evening, it's 50 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts out of the northwest.
Holy cow.
And then that maybe be a blizzard that then shows up a little bit as well. It looks like here for you all, Evan, on Wednesday evening, that's when the cold front comes in with some rain.
Yeah, it looks like we're just going to have rain out of this. The SPC put a marginal risk. I didn't really put a lot of stock in it because we won't have really any shear or instability. But a few thunderstorms are possible, and this is going to take place pretty much between like sunset and sunrise. And the bigger story is it's the first day of spring the following day, and our highs are going to be in the 50s. The
Ooh.
50s on the first day of spring.
Same here.
Alabama doesn't follow the proper channels as far as behaving because we also have a freeze on Friday morning. Now, granted, our average final freeze is March 24th, so we're still before it. But yeah, the early morning is going to be chilly on Friday, and I think everywhere gets a frost. A handful have a freeze.
Let's see. See if I can find it. There you go. There you go. Friday morning. Yeah, 30. Yeah, I
So
can see
the
that.
freeze is going to be, I've got 34 for the low, but the areas north of here that are a little bit more rural and there's some terrain change, I think will be as cold as 30 to about 32.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then we'll just stay really active. We'll briefly touch on the forecast accuracy thing. One of our professors, Greg Nordstrom, is going to join us in 2 weeks.
Yeah, the 31st, I believe.
In 2 weeks, and we can get to more in depth on this coming up. But I do just want to briefly go over, I mean, just how much better at forecasting we've become at hurricanes. Greg's a big hurricane forecaster. And if you just follow this bottom line here, that means we're getting very good at forecasting the position of a storm. I mean, even compared to 20 years ago, we used to be off by 275 miles. Now we're off by, let's say, 175 miles. So
It'll be great to talk to Greg. Greg's one of the best forecasters in the country, and he knows severe weather like no one's business. And I bet he'll have a lot to say about this and how much stuff has changed because there's also things for all of you out there who want to grab a screen model and think like 10 days out it'll verify. You have to know stuff outside of what the models tell you. You have to be able to look at the data and then interpolate it, I should say, to like what's actually going to happen. And Greg is like the best. He's the one who taught us forecasting. Whether we learned it all or not is still to be seen. But
I forgot some bit, unfortunately. This graphic, I can't go too in depth with it because it takes time. It's got kind of confusing, but suffice to say, our 7-day forecast is about 75% accurate. And then our 10-day forecast is about 50% accurate, which honestly, days 7 through 10, that's about right.
yeah, speaking of forecast, who's winning this week?
You win.
Oh yeah, I saw
You
the
win.
low and I was like, I think I got this.
The low is low. Man, that's the second week in a row that I have just whiffed on the low. My
Not by
gosh.
much. I was only 2 degrees colder, and I guessed, to be fair, I guessed that the low temperature would happen at night, and it did. In the morning, it was much warmer. But a front came
Yeah.
through and we had our low at like 11:58, and then it got even colder the Sunday morning. But
Yeah. Yeah. So Evan, when I averaged it out, like it was like 31.5 to 31. So Evan's more accurate low definitely took the cake there. Evan has now cut the deficit to one forecast,
keep in mind,
and
I was down 3-0.
that's right. That's right. We started this down 3-0, and he tied it up. So let's keep it
Honolulu.
interesting. We're going to Honolulu
Oh
for
boy.
next week. For next week, and before we leave you, I gotta show this one.
Oh man.
The double crank. Is that what were you showing with this?
Let me tell you, I was talking with my hands for one. Okay. Number two, you get into such like a tunnel and you're just doing stuff. But apparently this went viral because I was doing like I don't know some. It looked like I was about to fight the tornado. I think is what the comments said. But yeah, that went crazy, and I guess I need to work on my hand motions and speaking less. But yeah, it's always funny what people take away. So I've been doing this for 10 years, and I've never got more attention than what I got this weekend in my coverage. So if you're watching because of that, thank you. We love doing this thing, and we do it every week.
So we do it every week. And by the way, Evan is not new at all to Birmingham. He's been there for a while.
Yeah.
But
Nice to meet you, though.
thanks for watching. And if you're watching from Kansas City, I've been here for 5 years too. But
Yeah, we're gaining. We're gonna pick it up.
all right. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining us for this edition of Weather Wise Guys. We're back next week for more Evan. See y'all.